Today, we're looking at Noodler's Upper Ganges Blue. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Noodler's Upper Ganges Blue is a blue ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples, I put the ink into a different pen for a day, I then put it into a Pierre Cardin President with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we go to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see the outline of the blue line that I put down, and interestingly, inside it, it looks a little bit purple. The blue pushes up, and I don't see any of that light purple show up anywhere else. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And none of the purple moved. I don't see it anywhere. I see tons of the blue, but the color that comes out, and it pushed way up, was this very highlighter teal kind of color, or highlighter turquoise, if you prefer that. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. Now, I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles it just wonderfully. It doesn't spread, it doesn't blow out in any way, nothing happens. It's a great note-taking ink. Water moved a little bit of the darkest ink around. You see where it got a little on the bottom of this paper as I was trying to get it off. Otherwise, it was really unaffected. Now, pen flush started to break this ink up and started to move it out of the way, but again, only some of that really kind of the turquoise color, not all those blues. Strangely, while the pen flush moved those blues, bleach, you can't really see it coming through on a video. It did almost nothing, but there was a little bit of the turquoise taken off the top. And that's about it. The bleach really spread up the left side. So that left lighter area that you see from bleach all the way up to high, that's the bleach. That's the 1/3 bleach solution. It's taking all of that turquoise off, leaving the blue, meaning test this in an inexpensive pen before you put it into something, that's a couple $100 and risk staining it. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's Upper Ganges Blue has a viscosity of 2.95, making it just a little bit drier than normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Noodler's Upper Ganges Blue has an average dry time of 8 seconds, making this a fast drying ink. But I think that's not so much that it's drying, but that it's aggressive getting into the paper. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and at first, I loved everything about this ink. And then I started using it in broader, wetter pens, and I experienced some difficulties. Some difficulties that really aren't going to show themselves here in the writing samples, but the writing samples are as they are with standard pens. So I standardized for that reason. Just be warned about broad pens. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. And it has some nice shading going on. It has some very dark spots in the midst of this darker blue. Like the tops of both P's are much darker. The R is much darker. The ES in Ganges is much darker, and the E in blue much darker. It's very nice shading up there. The extra fine is a significantly lighter tone. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it has some very nice shading. Like the H in the is much darker than the rest of the word. The K in quick, the R in brown, the word the is much darker than the word over right next to it. It's very nice. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is slightly darker than the extra fine. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and gorgeous shading. Quick starts dark, gets very light, and gets very dark on the K. Brown starts very dark, gets nice and light, and becomes a mid-tone on the N. Fox starts light and gets very dark. It's beautiful. And 6 seconds to dry. This great shading on a fast-drying ink, amazing. I was in love. The scrubby for both show plenty of color variation, and we get plenty of color variation. And the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Tomoe River, no bleeding, but a lot of ghosting. That's the paper. The 1.1, a super dark blue. No feather, spread, halo sheen, no shading. The extra fine is significantly lighter than the 1.1. The extra fine, why is my paper all bent up like this? The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. The loss of shading is not so much about the ink, more the paper. The medium is the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it does give us some shading. Like the K in quick is much darker, the E in the is much darker, the X in fox, the R in over, beautiful. 1 is much darker than the 3. 13 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation, but I didn't get any. And the scrubby of the medium shows plenty, and we get plenty. The smear test, I do not think you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. And I'm looking at where I took my notes. And the thing is, I'm getting a bunch of bleeding on my notes, and it's not as bad as I've gotten with some others. This is a medium nib that I was taking my notes with, but it's a wetter medium. It's the Pierre Cardin President. And anytime I used a broad wet, straight through. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is significantly lighter than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It has beautiful shading. Quick starts as a nice mid-tone, gets very light, gets super dark at the K. Brown stays as a nice mid-tone all the way, but Fox starts light and works its way to very dark. Over starts very light and works to very dark. Beautiful. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine. Medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and some very nice shading. Like quick starts with a light up top, gets darker in the bottom of the Q. Light into the rest of quick until we get to the C where it starts getting darker and the K is super dark. Brown starts as a nice dark mid-tone and works its way lighter. Fox starts very light and gets very dark. Nice. 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show plenty of color variation, and we get plenty of color variation in both. And the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. So being such a great ink, I was also curious what it did with a yellow tone background, so I tried yellow Rhodia, which gave no bleeding and no ghosting, but that was expected because it is still Rhodia paper. But look at how that blue, for as powerful an ink as this is, that blue turns a lovely turquoise on the yellow paper. That means this is a more opaque color. My microphone is dragging on something. Sorry about all that. There we go. It turns to a lovely turquoise right here. So nice. The 1.1 has no feather, spread. It has halo. It didn't have halo on the white, but it does on the yellow. I think it just gets to show it probably was there and I couldn't see it. No sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It still gives some very nice shading. Not as much as on the white paper, but still very nice shading. The H in the is much darker. The K in quick, the B in brown. The word the is significantly darker than the word dry directly underneath it. Nice. 6 seconds to dry. Now medium is even lighter than the extra fine. Medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen,
And it has some very nice shading. K in quick is much darker. The BR in brown is much darker. It starts very dark. It gets much lighter on the OW and very dark on the N again. The starts light and gets very dark. Over starts light and gets dark. Jump starts light and gets dark. Dog is a nice mid-tone all the way. The number 8 is dark at the bottom, lighter at the top. Wonderful. 8 seconds to dry. The Scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we are getting plenty of color variation. And the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. White lines paper. And this is what doesn't make sense to me. It performed very well on white lines paper, but with mixed results. It had a lot of deep bleed on the 1.1, deep bleed on the extra fine, nothing on the medium. The medium's fantastic. It's deep into the page. It's not all the way through the page. There's some ghosting with the extra fine, but not the medium. That's totally backwards to me. So if you could use the back of the page, that's a user, that's up to you and your pen, really. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is the exact same tone as the 1.1 with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. 1 second to dry. Amazing. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine. Medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shading. 1 second to dry still. The Scrubby of the extra fine and the medium both show us a little bit of color variation. The extra fine, you have to look far left to far right. Medium, it's very obvious, but we didn't get it in a writing sample. And the smear test, you could definitely recover if you smeared while you were writing. And that is all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Noodler's Upper Ganges blue, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I wanted a nice magenta red. I chose Noodler's Black Swan and English Rose. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Noodler's Upper Ganges blue? This is a very permanent ink that has a nice color to it. Now, when I was using a broader, wetter pen to take my notes, it did start to seep aggressively through the paper. Now, I didn't experience this a lot in the writing samples, but in your broad, wet pens, you do have to watch out that it could make its way through onto the page underneath. I experienced that just a little bit. More common, I saw it coming through in really heavy ghosting, not bleed that touched the page underneath in broader, wetter pens. So just use it in finer pens. Thanks for watching.